Welcome into the CHGO Blackhawks Podcast presented by PointsBet. Use promo code CHGO when you sign up to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. I'm Jay Zawaski. With me, as always, are Mario Tirabassi and Greg Boysen. What's up, fellas? How you doing?
What's going on?
It is Throwback Thursday, and today and next week, we're going to have some fun memories. Today, we're going to recap the 2009-2010 regular season for the Blackhawks. And then next week, which happens to fall on the 12-year anniversary of the 2010 Stanley Cup, we'll recap the 2010 playoffs. So 2 Thursdays in a row full of 2010 action, and I cannot wait to get to it, fellas.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Obviously, you know, with everything we learned in the past year, talking about this season is a little not as fun as it used to be. You know, the elephant in the room, of course, is all the Kyle Beach scandal and abuse and just cover up of that. So it kind of tarnishes it a little bit. We got to be honest. It does. Yep. It feels kind of weird to be like, yay, 2010, when all that great stuff that we're going to acknowledge and celebrate happened on the ice. And in the behind the scenes, this horrible stuff was going on and basically being ignored. So yes, we acknowledge that this also happened during this season, and it sucks and it's terrible, and we've talked about it a lot. But anytime you talk about this specific season, it would be completely irresponsible and unfair to not acknowledge that while this great team was winning on the ice, these horrible things were going on off the ice and overlooked by the organization. So this season, one of my favorites as a fan, is not quite the same as it used to be because of the ugliness that was later exposed. But we're going to focus on the fun stuff. Well, mostly the fun stuff. There was some not fun stuff that happened during this season too, as well.
Yeah, and that's the fallout of these things is that now anytime we reminisce, anytime we talk positively about these things, we've got to qualify it. We've got to do remember, this was all wonderful on the ice, but this happened, and we can't get into the good stuff without mentioning the bad stuff. And when we talk about tarnishing a legacy, this is what we mean, right? They can't take the cup away. They shouldn't take the cup away. The hockey team was the best hockey team in the league that year, and they deserved to win the Stanley Cup. But now, anytime we have a conversation about that team, that's going to be the preamble to almost everything we do. Get used to it. We have to do it because it's irresponsible to not acknowledge it. We're about to celebrate the greatest regular season in Blackhawks history, their first Stanley Cup since 1961. We can't have fun without acknowledging the crappy part that went along with it. So I think we did a good job of that. And Throwback Thursday is Greg's passion project. He kills it. He does a better job than if I spent 3 weeks putting this together. I wouldn't do as good of a job as Greg does. He's just a master at this sort of stuff. So, my friend, I will give you the floor to lead the way here for Throwback Thursday.
Well, that's putting a lot of pressure on me. I got to live up to the hype now. Thanks a lot.
You already have, buddy.
My insecurities are just going crazy right now. But no, this was a lot of fun. I love the Throwback Thursdays. I love doing the history stuff. So, I mean, where do we start? We start at the very beginning. We got to remember there were a lot of expectations coming into the 2009-10 season. The previous season, the Blackhawks finished with 104 points. They had taken that next step. They hosted the Winter Classic. They made it all the way to the Western Conference Finals where they lost to the Red Wings. It was kind of like, okay, they learned to lose in order to learn how to win, and now they were ready. And then in the summer, things got ratcheted up a little bit.
Yes.
They signed a guy named Marian Hossa to a gigantic contract, and they also brought in his buddy Thomas Kopechki. Kopechki. I always say it wrong. I always just want to call him Kopecky. I want to pronounce it like it's spelled. But then they also brought in John Madden, who was a underrated, great veteran addition. He was a Stanley Cup winner with the New Jersey Devils. One of those guys, those coaches on the ice. He's a coach now in the AHL. So that was a very underrated signing. He's one of those guys that, his value was never shown on the score sheet. It was shown at practice, in the locker room, on the bench. But that Hossa contract, man, that was when, and we did a whole episode on Marian Hossa a few weeks ago. You can go back in the archives, whether on the YouTube channel where you're watching or wherever you get your podcast. Look up that Marian Hossa show we did. I think it was right after his return to the Hawks there, Marian Hossa night. We spent an hour showering our hero with praise and love, as we do, because he's worth it.
And it wasn't enough.
No, but that when Marian Hossa decided he was going to come here, that moved the needle, did it not?
Oh, I mentioned it on that show. That to me was the indication of, okay, people around the league are seeing what we're seeing here. They recognize what is about to become a very special group of hockey players. And it's funny, I was watching to brush up, and it's 12 years ago. Got to get my memory back up for the conversation today. I watched the 2010 Stanley Cup DVD they put out, and it sort of starts with the 2009 Western Conference Finals loss to the Red Wings, and them sort of saying, like, yes, like Greg said, we had to learn how to lose, but we also realized we got a lot of really solid young players. We've got to add some veterans that have been there before to lead us through this. Madden, Kopecky, and of course, Marian Hossa, part of it. And as it goes on, and we'll get to this more next week when we cover the playoffs, those guys, Madden, and even like Andrew Ladd to a certain extent, were the guys that the young players leaned on when the things started to not go great in the playoffs. Like, how do you overcome this? How do you, how do we take the next step? How do we get through this bad stretch of play? Those guys, not only what they brought on the ice, but what they brought off the ice to the team cannot be oversold, because they brought so much leadership and respect to that locker room. And this is, when you look at some of the best moves in Blackhawks history, you could look at that trio of free agent signings, starting with Hossa, and say, do they win the cup without any of those three guys? Maybe the answer is no.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about, when you think of the transition from that 2009 Western Conference Finals team to the 2010 Stanley Cup champion team, just they were so young in 2008, 2009, and it was those young guys that you're saying, like, oh yeah, they were the ones that leaned on the veterans. It was Seabrook and Keith and Toews and even Dave Bolin, Patrick Sharp. Like, these guys were the young guys at that time, and it's interesting to think back now, 12 years to that point where that was the young core, and you knew that was there, and they had to bring in the veteran pieces. Now you think of it, those guys are the veterans. The ones that are left are the veterans of this squad now, and it's just fun to think back to that time frame when those guys had the majority of their careers ahead of them, and I think you look at the turning point of the Blackhawks going from young up and coming hopefuls to legit contenders. It was that summer where they brought in Hossa and they made that was Marian Hossa coming to Chicago for a long-term on a huge long-term deal after doing 1 year with the Red Wings and falling short in the Stanley Cup final, and the year before that getting traded to Pittsburgh for a cup run, which also ended in the Stanley Cup final. So it was like, you bring in a guy who had been there the two previous years, had fallen just short in both of those series, and it's peak Marian Hossa making that commitment, and that was an incredible signing by the Blackhawks at that time that really sparked the dynasty, basically.
Well, it's Marian Hossa clearly cup chasing in Pittsburgh and Detroit, and then he says, all right, if I'm really going to chase a cup, I'm going to sign long-term in Chicago. That is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And think of that as a player on the Hawks saying like, oh my God, that dude believes in us this much that he's going to sign the rest of his career basically here because he knows chances are he's going to win a Stanley Cup with us. That's got to go such a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're going to get to it, but we've got to wait till November to see Marian Hossa's debut. And the Hawks are already off to a great start. And then they add that dude. It's like, come on. It's almost not even fair.
Yeah. No, yeah, and that's a good segue into the month of July of 2009 was not all sunshine and lollipops for the Blackhawks. That is for sure. In fact, the rest of that offseason was a little, not great. Because of bringing in Hossa, obviously the Hawks had to part ways with the leading scorer from the previous season in Martin Havlat. Other notable losses that offseason was goaltender Nikolai Habibulin, center Samuel Paulson, and defenseman Matt Walker. Were kind of the minuses from that team. And then it was shortly revealed after signing Hossa the big contract, the buzz was killed a little bit because it was revealed that he had to have some shoulder surgery and he wasn't going to be available for the start of the season. He ended up missing the first 22 games of the season. So essentially a quarter of the season was missed by Hossa. But as we'll get into, it didn't really seem to really affect them that much. There were some other interesting things that happened. The league the Players Association filed a grievance against the Blackhawks shortly thereafter, stating that the Blackhawks missed the deadline for giving qualifying offers to restricted free agents. This caused then general manager Dale Talon, who was the guy who signed Hossa, to quickly sign 8 players to make sure they did not end up as unrestricted free agents. And this mistake was a big deal, and it ultimately cost him his job. July 14th, Dale Talon is out, and he who shall not be named, Stan Bowman. That era begins. I think the whole fax machine incident was just the excuse for the Blackhawks to kind of do what they wanted to do. I think this move was in motion. The second Scotty Bowman comes in, and you have Stan Bowman. I think it was, hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, just hold tight. We're going to give you that gig. And this was just the last thing to say, hey, all right, Dale's out, Stan's in. So that was, as we know from Pat Foley, Dale Talon is the guy responsible for these 3 championships, not solely responsible. He had a big part of it. A guy that I don't think it's enough credit for this championship and future championships is Mike Smith, the guy before Dale Talon. He drafted a guy named Duncan Keith. He was pretty good. He drafted a guy named Corey Crawford. He was okay. So yeah, while Dale Talon did a good chunk of the foundation, he wasn't the only guy responsible for these 3 championships, the first coming later in this year. What are your memories about this this whole kind of changing of the guard in the front office that July?
It certainly felt, I don't know if fishy is the right word, but inevitable that Bowman was going to be named GM. And I know there was a lot of like internet speculation about what went on, but all I know is those errors are what forced whoever's fault they were, is what forced the big fire sale at the end of the cup. That's why you lost Bufflin and Ladd and all those guys that had to leave because of the cap mismanagement from the clerical error. And look, I mean, if let's be honest, like if Stan Bowman had made that mistake and gotten fired, no one would really think much of it, right? Because Stan Bowman is not and was never beloved. Dale Talon was beloved. He was a broadcaster. He was a good guy. He was gregarious. Fans liked him. So there's always going to be some suspicion around it. But if any GM makes a mistake like that, that is a fireable offense. Yeah. And I mean, I don't think you had people tampering with the mail to screw Dale Talon. If they want to fire Dale Talon, they can. They don't need to come up with a reason to do it. People will get over it if the team wins. But it was just a weird, why does this stuff always happen with the Hawks? It was like the Chris Gratton signing where there was like a box unchecked or something weird when they tried to sign him as a free agent and the fax was smudged and then the signing never happened. And this sort of stuff always seemed to happen with the Hawks. Remember, this is before they had won a cup. So everyone's still in the mindset of the Hawks screw everything up. Nothing ever goes right. They're not, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was just sort of another in that line of, oh my God, come on. Let's get it together here. Why does this happen to no one but the Blackhawks, it seems?
Yeah. I remember feeling like just kind of like that's, it just felt not like there was something being held back in the information that was let out, but this was a completely different time of, how sports were covered and not in the age of, instant information and instant insiders and things like that, like we have now. But yeah, I remember thinking like, oh, okay, I didn't really, put too much into it at the time, but yeah, knowing what we know now and knowing how everything played out after that, it was a major event, and yeah, kind of unceremonious for Talon, but it happened, and I think, to your guys' point, giving the praise to Talon and to Smith and before Bowman, and really constructing the roster that he was then tasked with basically managing for the next couple of years. That's where a lot of the dynasty praise should be laid.
For sure. I had completely forgotten about the Chris Gratton thing. Jeez, that was well, in hindsight, it probably wasn't a bad thing that they never got Chris Gratton, but
he was all right. I liked him a lot. He good old 77. I like 77s. For the most part.
Do you still like 77s, Jay?
As of today, I still do. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll see how that is come December. And then there was a little more controversy before we got to the actual hockey, in what unfortunately became a summertime tradition during the Cup runs. Patrick Kane got himself in the news for the wrong reasons. He was arrested in Buffalo in August after he and his cousin got into an altercation with a local cab driver. Ultimately, on August 27th, Kane and his cousin pleaded guilty to non-criminal disorderly conduct charges, and were both given conditional discharges, but not a great look. A guy coming off of a great season.
Yeah, it was not good.
No, not good. And again, unfortunately, this was something we had to deal with seemingly almost every summer for the next couple of years. But it was a case of, hey, boys will be boys and whatever. And we kind of looked the other way. And
completely different. Again, the technology was completely different, now than it was back then. And also the way that people viewed stories like this was a lot different. And, yeah, I mean, I can't imagine if something like this had happened to a player of that stature now compared to back then, how maybe different it would have been covered. But I think at that point, yeah, like you said, Greg, I think there was a lot of the playful excuses and making jokes about it, but really, knowing what we know now, it was something that you would have hoped the Blackhawks at that point maybe would have pulled Patrick Kane aside and said, hey, we can't have you doing this if you're going to be, the face of this team for years upon years to come. And it was one of the first of an unfortunate pattern for Kane in his younger days.
First of several.
Maybe a more stern talking to and handling of this situation would have prevented a trip to Madison, Wisconsin in a couple of summers and a whole nother fiasco, but nothing we can do about it now. Hindsight's 2020, but that, it happened. So we got to talk about it. And
so I want to address something on the chat real quick. Jay Serio said, wasn't Stan Bowman in charge of the faxing which sabotaged Dale Talon? We have no fact in that comment at all. These are the sort of things that make their way onto blogs and message boards, and then because it's repeated over and over again, it becomes fact, but it's not actual fact. No one has any proof that Stan Bowman is the guy who hit send on the fax machine and tried to sabotage Dale Talon. Those are internet rumors and nothing more. So yeah, I would not hold those things as gospel truth.
No, lots of rumors around these teams that have somehow become folklore in Chicago about this incident, some other players, and who may have punched who and who was extra friendly with whose wife. I guess when you hear stuff like that so often, you just accept it as truth. But
it's a game of telephone.
I wasn't in the room when those faxes were sent, so I have no idea who pressed send, and I'm just going to go by what the official release was. So, yeah, good point. Calling that out and addressing that. I guess that's fun for some people to speculate and have their own versions of the stories. But we finally get to talk about some hockey.
Yay!
We finally get to the season. Yes, we get to the season. And if you remember, that season started in Helsinki, Finland, with a pair of games against the Florida Panthers. And it was a guy that is forgotten a lot on this team. It was Cristobal Hugh, who was the opening night starter. He was one of the two big free agents in the summer of 29. It was Hugh and Brian Campbell that came over. That were the big additions that started to make people notice what was going on here in Chicago. But Hugh got the start in that opening game. It was a 4-3 shootout loss to the Panthers in Helsinki. But then the very next day, game 2 of that 2-game set, it was a Finnish goaltender that we really didn't know a whole lot about, made his Blackhawks debut, Antti Niemi, and it started off a little foreshadowing of what was to come, a 4-0 shutout for the Blackhawks' first win of the season and Niemi's NHL debut, picking up a shutout in his home country. How cool was that? And what did you kind of – I remember being like, well, okay, maybe this kid's got something and Hugh can be shaky, so let's see where this goes.
Yeah, it was very encouraging. And, again, not knowing what's coming, it's hard to look back. It's hard, like knowing the outcome ultimately of this season. It's hard to look back on it and without that lens. But just for Niemi personally, to be able to do that as a free agent signing, like you said, to win a shutout in his debut in his home country is fantastic. And whether or not we knew he was going to be the starter for the playoffs or not, or if he was going to dethrone Hugh or not, at least you had a feeling through 2 games that you had 2 pretty solid goalies on your hands. Hugh, I think he was not anywhere near what he was billed to be. But I also don't think he was quite as awful as people remember him being too. So you had a pretty good goaltending tandem that ultimately Antti Niemi won out and got that starting job, and thank God he did. But yeah, it was just another feeling in that season of look how good and how deep this team is. You've got 4 lines, you've got 3 defensive pairs plus, you've got 2 goalies you trust. That's what a championship team looks like.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mario.
I was just gonna say what I remember from the start of that season and starting in the trip to Finland was just the 2009 2010 era of YouTube and how Blackhawks TV, the access that they got, it was like kind of like revolutionary at that point, and like seeing the players in the hotels and traveling and out in the streets of Finland and whatnot. I remember that kind of content coming out at the same time of them being there and starting the season, and just thinking like, wow, this is so cool, like to see this side of the team and everything. And I just remember taking away that at that time as being like, wow, this is new and awesome. And yeah, I mean, I have fond memories of that. And
Patrick Sharp mentioned as part of that trip, it was huge for the bonding. It's 10 days together overseas. Yeah. You're rooming, you're getting to know your new teammates, you're hanging out with your old buddies, creating those bonds that you don't get to, you're on a 3-game road trip and you're traveling a bunch, and it's just pretty much game, morning skate, game, travel. When you're together for a long time with no option to go home and you're always together, those can be huge. And that team certainly used that opportunity to bond. And as the season went on, you saw how much that team, and now with the Kyle Beach stuff shadowing over, it's like they took care of each other. Well, I guess they took care of the guys that mattered, but you know what I mean? It's just like they felt that there was a close-knit bunch, and they were all together all the time. And I think that's part of having a young team is you don't have a lot of guys with family obligations and things to do. It's like it's just hockey. And that's what we'll be keeping our eyes on now in this new generation of Hawks as these young players come. How are they going to bond? How are they going to connect? And how is that, new chemistry going to be born? That's the fun part of a rebuild.
For sure. Absolutely. Maybe we need to start every season out in Europe just for the next couple of years, just to see,
Hey, remember when Alex Nylander scored the first goal in the overseas? First goal, what they play in? They were in Finland again, right? And he scored.
Was it Germany
against Philly? Maybe it was Germany,
or was that the Czech Republic? Why is the Czech Republic coming?
Whatever.
I don't remember it because I have blocked. I don't remember it because I have blocked Alex Nylander from my memory. Yeah. My therapist said that would be the best thing for me moving forward, so I took her advice.
Okay, good for you.
Well, it didn't take long for another memory. Just the second home game of the season, October 12th, is a very memorable night for a lot of reasons. That's where the Blackhawks fell behind 5-1 to the Calgary Flames after the first period, and then won 6-5 in overtime, thanks to Brent Seabrook, who scored a few really cool overtime goals in his career, and this was the first memorable one. This was a fun game. This is a game is one of my favorite Blackhawk games of all time. I've told this story before. This was a game. I had taken my somewhat new girlfriend Jill at the time to this game, and she would end up being my partner for 10 years before she passed away in 2019. This was our first Blackhawks game together. I had season tickets at the time, and I'd always joked to people like, hey, if the Blackhawks lose the first time I take you, you ain't coming back. And here it was, 5-1. And I was like, 5-1 after the first. I was kind of like, I was jokingly telling her, like, I don't know, this may be our first and last Blackhawks game. And she says, don't worry, Blackhawks are going to win this game. I was like, yeah, right. And then they came back and won. And then I was like, well, I might have something here with this one. And this team, we may have something here with them. Yeah. So that's a game that always sticks out in my memory for a lot of great reasons. It makes me smile thinking of that. And what a great night that was.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal scorers for the Hawks: Madden, Kane, Bufflin, Bolin, Sharp, Seabrook.
Some pretty big names there.
Yeah.
I mean, that was that team. They just rolled 4 lines and eventually wore you down.
Yep. And that was, the era of this, franchise where you could really just say, like, no matter what the score was, they were not out of a game. Like, it was 5-0. No, that's we'll see what happens. It wasn't just just throwing something out there just to say, well, who knows what happens. Like, no, like, literally this team could come back from a 5-goal deficit. And yeah, it was just that was how that team was built. And it just obviously throughout the rest of the season, showed up so many times where, they were able to pull out games where, they were down a couple of goals. And then in late in the second period or in the third period, they just flipped a switch that other teams just couldn't do. And were able to, come back and win some games. And it was, just something that, especially against a Calgary team at that time that was, very, very competitive, a playoff contender. Like, it's not like they did that against the Thrashers or something like that. It was a legitimate team. So to do that in that fashion was really just and without Marian Hossa at that point,
yep,
it was a testament to, like, hey, this team is going to, be a danger to the rest of the league.
Reflecting on that game, Patrick Kane said, quote, "From then on, we knew whatever the deficit was for our team, we could come back."
Yeah,
that's it.
Sure.
And we saw it how many times where they're just like, oh, okay, time to play.
Yeah. That was the first game where they flipped the switch that they did so many times over the next 5 or 6 seasons. Very special. And then they finished the month of October with an 8-4-1 record, 17 points. And again, that was all without Marian Hossa. And as we get into November, we'll get to a special game there, because it's not till November 25th until Hossa makes his debut in San Jose. Was that Blackout Wednesday? That the night before Thanksgiving?
The 25th?
Game. Yeah, I think it was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Might have been.
I think a lot of people woke up that next morning. A lot of Blackhawk fans woke up that next morning needing a little bit of a boost to get their morning going. And I'm not talking about Strava coffee. What could those guys have had back in 2010, Mario, that could have made them feel a little better that Thanksgiving morning.
You know, I don't know the exact date that Athletic Greens was founded, but if it was back in 2009, 2010, that those people would have benefited from some Athletic Greens and their AG1 formula. Athletic Greens and AG1, it is formulated to improve your gut health, your immune system, and give you more natural energy. It's a great way to start your day with just one scoop of AG1. You absorb 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. It's, like I said, a great way to start off your day. And if you have different dietary restrictions for whatever reason it might be, whether it's gluten-free or keto or paleo, vegan, dairy-free, whatever it is, with AG1, you're good to go. It is a small once-a-day habit that will have big benefits in your daily routine. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. Just one scoop of AG1 in a cup of water every day. That's all you need. No need for a bunch of different pills or supplements to look out for your health. You get it all with just that one scoop. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do is go to athleticgreens.com/CHGO Blackhawks. That is athleticgreens.com/CHGO Blackhawks to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
And remember, the best way to support us here at CHGO is by supporting our sponsors, especially PointsBet. Download that PointsBet app and use the code CHGO when you sign up. Do that right now. You're going to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000, but that's not all. If you make a $50 or more first-time deposit, you're going to get a free CHGO membership that unlocks all of our great web content. Our goalie evaluations came out this morning. Throwback Thursday piece coming out later. You'll even get a free shirt of your choice from the CHGO locker. So $2,000 in free bets, a free CHGO membership, a free t-shirt from the CHGO locker, all that for making a $50 or more first-time deposit at PointsBet. It's your home for live in-play betting, and it just got even better with live NBA same-game parlay. That's their new feature. For the first time ever, you can build the perfect live NBA same-game parlay only with PointsBet. Combine your favorite bets during the game. Want more? You can always boost your live same-game parlays. Watch live, parlay live, and boost live with PointsBet. And now online sign-up is available in Illinois. So get out your phone, download that PointsBet app, use that code CHGO. You can do it start to finish on your couch. So what are you waiting for? Once the game starts, don't just bet. Live your bet life with PointsBet. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. I cannot wait. Let's get to the host of the game, please.
Yes, November 25th, 2009, Hossa, first game. This was the game where we really got an idea of how scary good this team can be. Marian Hossa scored 2 goals in his Blackhawks debut, including one of 3 shorthanded goals in a 7-2 win over the San Jose Sharks, which was a really big deal because if you remember, there it is.
Nice.
The Sharks finished the season as the only team with more points than the Blackhawks in the Western Conference, the entire league. So this wasn't like you were beating up on the lowly, whatever last place team was that year. It was you were beating up the best team in the NHL. They won if I remember correctly, the Sharks won the President's Trophy in this season, and they went in their home rink. Or the Caps did. Yeah, the Caps won the President's Trophy, but the Sharks were the best team in the Western Conference point-wise, and you went into their building with your brand new shiny toy and slapped them around for 60 minutes. Late night, nobody had to work the next morning. The beverages were flowing that evening from the little bit I remember. So, yeah, great game, and it was just that next step. It was like this team was already really good, and now we're like, this I don't want to get my hopes up too high, but this could be the one.
You've just added a hockey robot to your team, right? Like a guy who is a pretty much perfect hockey player jumps on a team that is already awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just that boost that night. I remember that day. It was hard to kind of remember all the little things that went in, but as there's little snapshots of the dynasty, Hossa's debut is one I remember vividly. It was just so memorable, and they kicked their ass, and Hossa was awesome. Like it was just all of it happening right away, and all the it's so rare that a game lives up to the hype, or a player's debut lives up to the hype. Like, you think about, I remember Chris Bryant's debut was like a bit of a flop. He didn't get a hit the first game, struck out. I think he popped out. Justin Fields' debut he didn't light the world on fire. You know what I mean? But it's so rare that especially a player's debut is so memorable and lives up to the billing. I think that's what made this one so special. And now looking back on it with the affinity we all have for Marian Hossa, that is one regular season game that I will never forget. And it was late, and it was just like, oh my God, you had to wait all day for that freaking game to come. And when it did, it would totally paid off.
And it's completely different too when you think about, like, you get excited for like new players, like young players, rookie players, like players that you're like, oh, this guy is going to be so good. He's so young. He's part of the future. All this stuff, like with Brian and with Fields. But this was established Marian Hossa coming in to be exactly and doing exactly what he was brought in to do, which was be a focal point of the team and to jump right into the lineup, first game coming off of surgery, and to just do that and be like, oh yeah, that's exactly why he's here. Like, it was just put a stamp on the team as like, yep, they're gonna make noise. This is gonna be, this is a team that every other team in the league has to take notice of, it has to deal with. And even though the Sharks, they finished 1 point ahead of the Blackhawks in the standings, I think a lot of people in the league and a lot of people, a lot of fans in that game probably realize, hey, the Stanley Cup road to the Stanley Cup is going to go through Chicago, and lo and behold, it went through both San Jose and Chicago. So it was an incredible coming out party for Hossa as a Blackhawk.
Just imagine the Hawks had their best season points wise and wins wise ever, missing Marian Hossa for 22 games.
Yeah. Right.
And didn't even have the best record in their conference.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So
second only to the Sharks and in the West. Yeah, Capitals had the President's Trophy. The two teams that finished last that season, a little side note, in 29th out of 30th, Toronto Maple Leafs with 74 points. In 30th and dead last, Edmonton Oilers with 62. So there you go. So if we're saying, this wasn't the Thrashers, no, it wasn't the 09-10 Oilers or 09-10 Maple Leafs.
They were planting the seeds to get Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid already.
Yes, 5 years ahead of time.
Yeah. Yes. So they rolled through the rest of the year. They went 8-2-2 in November. They went 11-4 during December, picking up 22 points. They carried right over into 2010, going 10-4-1 for another 21 points during the month of January. February only had 6 games total because there was that a little Olympic break there. But before the Olympics, on February 12th, they made a trade with the Minnesota Wild, acquiring shortly soon to be disappearing defenseman Kim Janssen and Nick Leddy for Cam Barker, who was the 3rd overall pick one year and just never really panned out. Janssen didn't play that many games and then fell off the face of the earth. But Nick Leddy was the centerpiece of that trade and became a very more than serviceable defenseman for the Hawks on their next championship run 3 years later. So that was a kind of a cool trade. And then, of course, the Olympics took over. We can do a whole Throwback Thursday just on those 2010 Olympic Games. Maybe we will, because that was fun. The brief synopsis as we're running, close to the time here. Of course, it was Jonathan Toews, Duncan Keith, and Brent Seabrook all winning gold for Team Canada, beating their buddy Patrick Kane in the gold medal game. An absolute classic of a game between Canada and U.S. One of the best hockey games I've ever watched, that gold medal game.
Golden goal.
Yep. Kane gets the silver for the Team USA. Hossa and Kopechki got they took Slovakia, a dark horse team, all the way to the bronze medal game before losing to Finland. So no shame there by those guys. Jonathan Toews was named the best forward of the tournament. And when you consider the people that were on his own roster, let alone that entire tournament, pretty high honor there for the Blackhawks captain being named the best forward of maybe the greatest assembly of hockey players ever in one place.
That was so fun. And AJ
Yeah.
in the chat says that was the greatest game he's ever watched. That gold medal USA Canada game. It's hard to argue with that. I mean, it was like, maybe it's because the Hawks were so good and everyone was hockey thirsty in Chicago, but it felt like the nation was gripped by that game. And maybe it was just local. Maybe it was just local, but Chicago was nuts. I was at Dingers on Western watching that game, and it was just awesome. It was such a fun atmosphere, such a great time.
It also helped that those games were being that those Olympics were in Vancouver, so there was only the 2-hour time difference. Right. That game was what, in the middle of the afternoon, wasn't it? Wasn't it like a Sunday afternoon? I thought it was.
Yeah.
It
was like a 3:00 game or something.
Yeah, I thought I saw. I remember seeing sunlight coming through the bar window as I was watching that game.
Hey, close that window.
That helped too, because if that game was in the last couple Olympics and it was live at 4:00 in the morning, nobody would have cared. But the fact that was taking place in Vancouver, you can show it right in the middle of the day or prime time.
It was live, and that was the thing too. It was live. People weren't waking up to the result,
and that kind of put NBC on the map too for their hockey coverage. I don't think they had the rights at that point, but I think that was where they were like, "Hey, maybe we should get involved in this."
Yeah.
And
because those games were on like Versus, which was an NBC like property, but it wasn't on NBC itself at that point.
I thought the gold medal was on NBC
I mean the
proper.
NHL games.
Yeah.
The NHL
the
games
NBC,
were on Versus. Yeah.
So I think that was when the reaction to those games and that gold medal game, I think, led to NBC investing more into the league, and they did a really good job over the next few years. And of course, now that led to them getting the even bigger deal with TNT and ESPN, and getting major ratings of this year's playoffs. And to me, that sounds like a good drop off here to talk about this year's playoffs and our points bet play of the week, which we're gonna. I'm gonna pick the under in the Panthers game.
I'm gonna say
of 0.
Yes.
Yeah. Pick their golf score.
There
2 under par for Jonathon Huberdeau. No, we're going to stick with the playoffs. We've been treated to a couple of really good games so far. I'm going to actually do a 2-leg parlay for this week's point bet play of the week.
Adventurous.
We're going to start with tonight's game 2, Edmonton, Colorado. Guess what I'm betting? I'm betting the over. The over is 7. I don't think that's going to be an issue whatsoever. That might be hit in the first period, the way these two teams are scoring goals.
Yeah.
We still aren't 100% sure who's playing goalie, who's healthy, who's not.
I think Francois is in for Colorado. Let me confirm that here.
So that just makes this bet even better that the backup is in. Here's your backup goalie against Connor McDavid. Have fun.
Enjoy.
Big game there, but I am parlaying that with taking the money line on Tampa Bay in game 2. Yes, Tampa Bay didn't look great in game 1, a 5-2 loss. Was it 5 or 6? 5-2 loss to the 6-2. They added a late goal there. Andrei Vasilevsky, not good this year with 8 days more of rest. So, hey, we saw that in that Toronto series. They lost 6-0 in that first game. They came back and won that series. Over the last 3 seasons, the Tampa Bay Lightning have not lost back-to-back playoff games since they were swept out of the first round by the Columbus Blue Jackets since 2019. Since then, they have gone 17-0 in games following a playoff loss. To me, until they lose, that's the safe bet. And the way they talked after the game last night, they were like, yeah, we suck tonight. We're going to go watch the video. We're going to know what we did wrong, and we're not going to do that in game 2, and we're going to win. And I believe them. So I'm parlaying the over in game 2 of the Oilers and Avalanche and taking the Lightning on the money line. That's my points bet play of the week. That is at plus 218 are the odds there. So if you throw $10 on that, you're going to get almost $32 back. I think that's pretty good value for 2 bets that are minus odds, but throw them together, you get the plus odds. So that's over in Oilers, Avalanche, and Lightning on the money line is our points bet play of the week.
Sweet. I like it.
Nice.
That's hard to argue with that logic, by the way.
Yeah.
You gotta
very
play
sound.
the odds. Those
Yeah.
are two things that are likely to happen. And now that I've officially put money on it, neither will happen. But
yeah, I'm gonna go do the under tonight and and go
probably
with the
not a
Rangers.
bad.
Yeah.
Some of us gonna win.
Yeah.
So shortly after that Olympic happened, that gold medal game happened on February 28th. March 3rd was the NHL deadline, but the Blackhawks really didn't do anything. After getting Kim Janssen, they got another veteran defenseman on March 2nd. They acquired Nick Boysen from the Anaheim Ducks for future considerations. That future considerations was a Marian Hossa injury in practice the following season.
Oh, God.
Yeah, remember that debacle? So this was a sign saying, like, a lot of times, like, you want your team to go and get the big guy, but the Hawks were like, nope, we're cool. We're just going to get another veteran defenseman, and these are our guys. So sometimes the locker room can be like, hey, they went out and got the big name player. They believe in us. Or, hey, they didn't really do anything. They believe in us. Their big move was Marian Hossa.
Yeah,
that was their big move. Yeah, so you didn't need anything. They just added a couple of veteran defensemen, and they rolled with it, and it was hard to argue with the results. March was not a great month for the Hawks. It was their only month of the season where they had a down record, 6-7-2, still 14 points during the month of March. But I think it was kind of like those dog days of hockey where you knew they were good, you knew they were getting to the playoffs, and it was kind of like, they took the foot off the gas for a little bit there. One of the notable games in March was March 25th. I remember being at this game. It was in Columbus. And we sat pretty much right by that stupid effing cannon. And the Blackhawks lost 8-3. I still can't hear out of my left ear. Cristobal Hugh gave up 7 goals on 27 shots and was pulled. And that was the last time we saw him in a Blackhawks uniform. That was his final start. They basically said, okay, it's Antti Niemi's job. He had kind of earned it at that point, but Hugh still started. That was his 46th start of the season. So it was Hugh was considered the guy.
Majority.
And eventually Niemi outplayed him. And this was the final straw. He did not start another game in the regular season. And he only made one brief relief appearance in that Vancouver series in the postseason. And this was it for Cristobal Hugh. This was his final game, regular season game in a Blackhawks uniform. And then you get into the month of April. Hawks closed out strong. They went 5-0-1 to finish out the season, and they hit a couple of milestones. On April 6th, they beat the Dallas Stars for a franchise record 50th win of the regular season. And the following night, they set another franchise record by picking up their 109th point of the season versus the St. Louis Blues. And on April 9th, the Hawks won their 23rd road game of the season at the Colorado Avalanche, setting another franchise record. This was a record-breaking season on many levels. And that wrapped up the regular season. They won the Central Division title with a 52-22-8 record, finished second in the Western Conference with a franchise record 112 points. They qualified for the playoffs for back-to-back seasons for the first time since 1996-1997. You're talking 13 years since they had been to the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. Hopefully it's not that long where we are now. They finished we talked about the goaltending a lot in the Hugh. They led the league, the Blackhawks did, with 11 shutouts on the season, and they also led the league with 13 shorthanded goals, 3 of them coming in that Hossa game at the Sharks. So they were a team that showed you that they were deep. They can roll 4 lines and beat you anyway. They can score on the power play. They could score shorthanded. Hey, and if they were having trouble scoring at all, well, we'll just throw a shutout out there and beat you 1-0. They were a team that can win anyway. You wanted to run and gun, they could beat you. You wanted to muck it up and play a shorthanded, low-scoring defensive game, they could beat you. So there it is, the 2009-10 regular season, the best in franchise history. Man, it was a lot of fun, and going through these games and going through all these stats, just a lot of memories coming back. What a fun season it was. It was the start of the year, and as the season wore on, more and more buzz to where it was like, at my normal watering hole those days, it was like there'd be like 4 of us that would show up to watch the Hawks game, and it'd be on like 2 TVs. But by like March, you'd go there and it would be on every TV.
Mm-hmm.
The sound would be on. Everybody would be in their Hawks t-shirt or Hawks jersey. And by the time the playoffs came, this was a Hawks town for the first time in my life. And it was amazing. Everybody was all about the Blackhawks. I was working full-time at the Greater Chicago Food Depository at the time, and everybody knew me, as a Blackhawks guy, and everybody wanted to talk to me, the warehouse guys, the customer service guys. Hey, what about the Hawks last night? And it reminded me of a funny story talk about Cristobal Hugh. We had an agency that came in to get food every week that was run by an order of French nuns. They barely spoke any English. And I remember after that trip to Columbus and having to sit through 8 goddamn cannon blasts because of Cristobal Hugh, I asked the French nuns, how would I say Cristobal Hugh sucks in French, just in case he gets into another game at the United Center? But they didn't tell me. But
I don't know if you're gonna get a bunch of nuns to tell you how to
live it up.
Say someone's terrible, someone sucks.
It was worth a shot.
Yeah, why not?
Shoot your shot. Why not?
Yeah. I definitely remember getting to the spring of 2010 and how everything was ramping up. I was in college at the time in Wisconsin at Wisconsin Whitewater, and me and my roommate were huge Hawks fans. It's one of the first things that we really bonded over, and we're still great friends to this day. And even in Wisconsin, it was a lot of interest in hockey and in the Blackhawks. A lot of people wanted to watch some of the biggest stars, up and coming stars of the league, and they just happened to be in Chicago with Toews and Kane and Duncan Keith and Seabrook. Like that was it became those games towards the end of the year and into the postseason. Those became appointment viewing. And even in college, we would have people over at our dorm just to watch the Hawks games and watch them in the playoffs. And then, it was just that was that time where, you want to call it the bandwagon time, but hey, that's where that tidal wave of interest in the Blackhawks, not only in the city, but across the country, across the NHL fan base. That's that point where it really picked up, and from that point on, it became the running joke that the NHL, NBC lived off of the Blackhawks being on national games. Well, it was for a reason. It's because everyone wanted to see some of the best players, some of the best teams, and that 2009-2010 team cemented Chicago as one of the premier premier hockey markets once again.
Well, yeah, Greg, you talk about being like the Hawks guy at your job, and that's when I was at the Score, and the Hawks suddenly got good, and they're looking around like, all right, well, who can talk about this at all? And I was like, yo, I'm your guy, and that's led to all of this, right? It led to me doing post-game shows during the playoffs. It led to me being on the air every time they won the Stanley Cup. It led to the Madhouse podcast, which now led to the CHGO Blackhawks podcast, and now like this is my career. Funny that it's 12 years after they win that cup, but it is what it is. And I'm here because of it. And it's, it was cool to be a Hawks fan, like a longtime Hawks fan during all this, because people would go out of their way to talk to you about it. And then when they eventually did win, people would go out of their way to congratulate you. Like, hey, I know this means more to you than it means to a lot of people. Like, you've been through a lot of the, BS and everything that this franchise has put you through. So I know this is maybe a little more meaningful for you than it would be for the average fan. And it was just cool to hear, it was cool to have that connection at that time of, hey, people are enjoying this and they're thinking of me while they're enjoying it, which is cool.
Yeah. It's, I hated being the Blackhawks guys the morning after losses.
Oh yeah. It's the worst.
Because it was always, hey, the Blackhawks look great. The Blackhawks were great last night when they lost. What happened to your Blackhawks?
Yeah, like, they're yours when they lose, or they're mine when they lose, or yours when they win. That's how it works.
Exactly. Yeah. So every time. But that season put me on this career path too, because it was the following year I started blogging on my own about the Hawks, because I had all my buddies that I would go to the games with and hang out with at the bar. And they would always be like, dude, what's going to happen before it happens. Like, you can tell us all these things. Like, you need to start writing this stuff down. You need to start putting this out there because like people were always told me like I love watching the Hawks games with you because you can tell me what's going on. And then the start of that following season, I started just my own little Google blog, and it eventually led me down a crazy career path, which has me sitting here talking to you guys. So without that playoff run, who knows? I still may be trying to explain what offside is to guys at the Greater Chicago Food Depository. So, this team, I owe this team a lot, and that's why the ugliness that came out about the season hurts so much because I had such a special connection to this team. It made me want to spend the rest of my career and livelihood within the sport of hockey. So when all this came out this past year, it really made me question what the hell I was doing and was it all worth it. But this team will always have a special place in my heart, even with what we eventually learned was going on behind the scenes.
Your point is right, and as you go on to the, it's my team when they're bad and yours when they're good. When bad shit happens, it's my team too, right?
Yeah.
So people can't think of the Kyle Beach things and say, "Oh, I wonder what Jay thinks of this." And every party I go, and it was the same thing with the Patrick Kane rape allegation and the cab driver thing and Madison. Everything bad that happened with the Hawks would come onto us too, which is part of it, right? Like it happens to Adam Hogue, it happens to Herb Lawrence, like whichever team it is, those guys are going to feel they're going to bear the brunt of the bad news. But that's why, like, we talk about like the Blackhawks are our life, quite literally. It's true, especially now that we're doing it 5 days a week and it's not like a little side hustle for all of us. Like it really is, and we are forced to answer for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Almost like the players are, so it's an interesting season to cover. It's an interesting team to cover. I cannot wait to next week till we get into the playoffs. That's going to be awesome.
Lots to talk about. I don't even know. We may have to do a 3-hour show next week.
Oh, that would suck.
Because we've got the Nashville series to start us off. Anything major happened in that series? I mean, you got to remember Brian Campbell wasn't even in uniform to start the playoffs because of a dirty boarding play by Ovechkin. I think that was on St. Patrick's Day or St. Patrick's Day weekend. Took Campbell out for a while, and then the Canucks. We didn't even touch on the rivalry with the Canucks. The hair pulling incident. We can talk a little bit about that, but that was the second straight meeting with the Canucks. That series was just memorable. Dustin Byfuglien just announcing his presence with authority and then carrying that over and almost single-handedly telling the Sharks to piss off, just dominating that series. And then, of course, the Stanley Cup final that all culminated on June 9th, 2010 with the goal only one person in the entire world saw go in the net. And we'll talk about that on the 12th anniversary of that very goal and the culmination of this amazing season. Next week on the next Throwback Thursday will be all about the 2010 playoffs, and that's going to be even more fun than today was.
Cannot wait for that. Look, now is as good a time as any to remind you to sign up at allchgo.com. Become a member. Get access to our Discord. Get access to our CHGO locker. Get yourself a free t-shirt. All of the great web content we have. It's not just Hawks. It's every pro team in Chicago, from the Bears to the Red Stars to the Fire to the Sky. Everybody is covered with top-notch, passionate experts just like you have here on CHGO Blackhawks. So sign up at allchgo.com. Join our community. That's what we're trying to be. We're trying to be a community of fans, and we want you to be part of it. And the best way to do it is at allchgo.com. Tomorrow, we are audio only. So, look for the podcast around the same time, give or take. Maybe closer to noon, 12:30, but it'll be available. And the best way to know when it's out, turn on those notifications on your phone. Get your podcast app out, hit that subscribe button, and turn on those notifications. So when a new episode drops, especially those audio-only versions, you'll know the second it's available. So we're going to sign off. We'll talk to you on Friday. From my partners, Greg Boysen and Mario Tirabassi. Thanks to Lawrence for producing the show. I'm Jay Zawaski. This has been the CHGO Blackhawks Podcast.